Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet and paying my respect to elders past and present. My name is Kylie Scott. I work in Inclusion and Diversity here at AMP, and I'm your host for this Amplify session on the skills of the future and the multi-generational workforce. We're joined today by visitors to AMP, our AMP board members and colleagues, members of the media and our online community via the live streaming. Very warm welcome to you all. As with all Amplify sessions, we encourage you to continue the conversation beyond the next hour or so. And we have our hashtag, Amplify2017. We'd love you to share your thoughts and ideas through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and internally via the hub. Sue Suckling is here today to engage us, challenge us, and prompt us to think about the ways we might see and do things differently in the future, which really starts with the here and now. We'll hear from Sue over the next 30 to 40 minutes, and then I'll throw over to you for questions. We just need to pop out of the room about 5 minutes before the hour to make way for the next session. So Sue Suckling is one of New Zealand's most experienced company directors and chairs, with more than 25 years in governance roles for both private and public sector organisations across a wide range of industries. Her experience spans corporate governance, commercial investment, M&A, change, marketing, digital disruption, and science and technology for business growth. Today, Sue is chair of no less than 6 organisations, including the New Zealand Qualification Authority. She has an OBE for contribution to New Zealand business and is a former New Zealand Businesswoman of the Year. Interestingly, upon Googling Sue, the first article I found was actually a piece from 2007 that began with this: "She's got dreadlocks, has cycled around Lake Brunner on a tandem and finished the coast-to-coast race 3 times. But most days you'll find Sue Suckling in the boardroom." And this, I thought, was a fascinating first insight into our speaker. Please join me in welcoming Sue.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, AMP, for inviting me to be at your event, which I really commend you for pushing out to the world, really, to force the discussion that we all need to have about what is our future world we live in. I'm going to talk to you today as an operator, not an academic, and I am an operator in a number of areas. I start with being an operator. I'm a mum of 4 millennials, 29 to 21, who keep me real and challenge me. I am an operator in that I sit on the board of some NZX companies and chair some of New Zealand's fast-growing mid-size SMEs. And I've always done some of my community work with the Crown and look to be involved in governance of Crown organisations. So right now I have 2 key roles there. I chair an organisation called Callaghan Innovation, which is looking at trying to accelerate the commercialisation of innovation in New Zealand companies through greater investment in research, science, technology, design. I could have got up and given in New Zealand Bernard's presentation and said, "Come on, New Zealand, why are we here? We need to move forward on that area." But my second role is I chair the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. I went into that role 10 years ago, and it was in total disarray. It was on the front page of the paper every day, and my goal, and I said our mission to the people when I went in, is that we want to be so boring that no reporter would want to write an article about us at all. And we just do some really boring things. We run the national exams, which for those in New South Wales is like your HSC. We accredit providers of education, tertiary non-universities, because the universities have their own system. We then say what courses they can provide. We do international qualifications equivalents. And finally, we keep your record of learning so that when you, as a learner, go somewhere, you're able to present that and it's verifying you've done all of those things. It's really boring. Now, I'm going to talk to you about that role my experience in that role, because my view is we need to disappear. And my view is qualifications as we know it now are over. And so I want to step you through some of my thinking on that. Now, it's always a great challenge when you get to day 3 and everyone's said everything already. So I thought what I would do is I'm just going to start off by thinking about what are some of the things that are shaping our workplaces going forward. And of course, we've heard about the workplace as mobile. And I was struck by this a couple of weeks ago. I was visiting my son who lives in Idaho in a place called Victor, and I'm sure none of you have been to Victor. It's over the hill from Jackson Hole. And it's full of millennials, and it's tiny. While I was there, I met nuclear physicists, I met rocket scientists, of course I met web designers that were doing work in New York. I met environmental engineers, and it went on. And they were all gainfully employed with significant organisations. And they had found ways to live in Victor, but be part of these workforces, fully employed, not part-time. And they commuted, they worked half-time, they did all sorts of things. That's a workplace being mobile. The second is Veronica Salt, and I Want It Now. We have workplaces are being shaped by on-demand. On-demand everything. We on-demand our TV, we on-demand our shopping, and you know, we even on-demand. I heard Randy Zuckerberg talk last week, and she talked about the app that you can actually sit in the movies and you can look at when is there a big enough break for me to go to the toilet. So, but on-demand is shaping our workplaces, because when Amazon Prime comes in and we've got 2-hour delivery, and then in Boston 1-hour delivery, it's making places like Westfield say, what is on demand for our business model? And it means when we think about the pickup, because some people do want to come to pick up, that when you're coming to pick up, we've got to know when you're coming, you've got to be able to ride up there and it comes into your car and out you go. So that you're a real person picking up, because you're not going to be part of Amazon, but it is on demand is driving our business models. We've heard robots and AI and robots and AI and robots and AI for 2 days. Robots, last week, some of you will have read that Dubai launched its first robotic police. This is their robotic police person thing, robot, which has got artificial intelligent robot. It is doing face recognition. It is taking fines off people. Their vision is that within 15 years, 25% of their police force are made up of these robots. We heard about IBM having a platform, IBM Watson being a platform, and what that could enable. And we heard about the simple little robots called Baxter that are about $25,000. And a New Zealand firm that I know in reasonable in metal manufacturing, really little boring in terms of it's not the big companies, bought one for $25,000 and within a week had it working and taking metal ingots from here and putting them over there, and actually 2 people were gone. That's shaping our workforces. So is global, and so is outsourced. And we do know, of course, about that. We've heard about where we'll plug in for expertise. We know we can send to India overnight. We've got a company in Dunedin in New Zealand where the people have got an office in San Francisco. Dunedin's called our gigatown in New Zealand. It's the fastest, cheapest broadband. They just have a wall of Skype, which is their whole office in San Fran, on all the time. So they just interact with the wall. It's global, it's outsourced, it's shaping how we think about our business models and workforce. And then, of course, we've got community, and community is part of how we do business, and it will shape how we do business. We heard about Kaggle, and we heard about if you put your problem on Kaggle and you maybe offer a small prize, you will have all sorts of people from around the world contribute to solving your problem. And you might be solving what was once a $40 million problem by engaging in this sort of community in the hundreds or tens of thousands. We've heard about access, not ownership, and we've heard about Airbnb, and we've heard about Uber. But what we also heard from one of our speakers is the workforce and the places we're in where who owns the capital and the value of the capital is changing. And we heard about not just Uber and it being how we ride share and we don't own a car, and there's some stats on this slide that talk about 25% of adults sold their car and 9% of them went to ride sharing. But we heard about if this goes forward in a few more years, then car parks aren't needed, possibly. And the assets and the value tied up in those is very different. And we've heard about a little bit about the power of communities and values shaping our workforces. And we've seen it when you look at values combined with social media, how you can have a response globally in no time at all to, do we feel cool about buying clothes made in sweatshops which burnt down and people's lives were lost? Do we feel cool about that? Who are the brands that are doing that? But some of those are sensational, you know, they're about car manufacturers that lie to us, etc. And we respond, but some of them are about values that are, I think, part of the go forward. What does it mean to have sustainable environments? So how do we feel about water management? And therefore, what are we going to do when we are thinking about what we purchase, what we eat? And therefore, this is shaping also the values of people and the community are shaping our workforces going forward. And there is a blurring between who is the entrepreneur and who is the employer. And Bernard was talking about those demographic changes. The fastest growing new business sector in Australia are businesses that are run by over 65-year-olds. They are the entrepreneurs. So we've seen quite a lot of the younger entrepreneurs, and we talk about them and the Gen Zs, but there's actually a whole lot happening in this, where there's a combination of a lot of experience and wisdom. They are shaping workplaces. And people have talked about the technologies with the greatest impacts, and this is from PwC in a recent report they put out. But if you go back to Tony Sieber's presentation, what he talked about is it's not about these silos of technology. It's about if we digitize anything, we actually create new opportunities, and it's about the convergence of the technologies. So it's AI with science, it's engineering and drones, and artificial intelligence. It's when these things come together that we are changing the workplaces going forward. So don't think about it in silos. Go back to yours. Go back to the agri sector and look at what is happening in technology that is changing the whole dynamic of how that can operate and be more productive. So what does all this mean? I'm here to talk to you about skills and the workplace, and I'm mostly going to talk to you about education. Well, there's a whole lot of reports. I'm going to flick through these. There's one that was done jointly with the Accountants Society Australia and New Zealand. For New Zealanders, it said, well, over the next 2 decades, 1 million jobs will go. That's big for us because we're tiny. McKinsey have a report out that they say, well, about 50% of everything we do now could be automated with the automation that we know now. CEDA put out a report and said more than 5 million jobs in Australia will be gone in 5 to 10 years from the technology advances. It isn't about unemployment, it's just those jobs no longer exist. And Manpower, who's one of the major provider in the people space worldwide, they put out, I think, a great report just recently where they went to 18,000 people over 43 countries, employers, and asked, will you be disrupted in the next 2 years with technology? 92% said yes. They went on to say, actually, when we think about lots of other things. When we think about the Gen Zs, 65% of the jobs they'll end up doing. So they're our digital natives. They're not even on our plate now. We know about the big four who now say, hold on a minute, we're not going for BComs, we're not going for A students, we're looking for other things, and we're prepared to employ other people coming from different backgrounds and different graduates, different ages. And this is just a jobs board out of Silicon Valley from last week, and it wants a Unity developer and a AR/VR developer and a VR FX designer, and it could have a Scrum manager, and it could have a whole lot of things that for a lot of us in this room, they're not even in our paradigm. Those are the jobs now. What will they be in another 5 years, another 10 years? Bernard started talking demographics, and I feel like he should have done this some more. You've got this ageing population that he talked about, and so when we're thinking about the workforce now in Australia going forward, you have got all those people working side by side, Gen Y, Gen X, the older, greater than 65, and so we've got to find ways of working with that. Getting rid of the biases. The old people need to go. They can't actually understand this stuff. The young people actually want to worry about what they're eating for lunch, and they don't deserve to have the job. Like, those are negative things. But this is what the demographics are, and we've got to take these on board when we think about what are the skills for the future and what do we do. So all those reports, and we could put up another 10, another 100, they will say, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, in some years, lots will happen. Lots of the jobs will disappear. I have no idea. It's just big and it's fast. A lot will go, and it's going really fast. And new things will come on board as well. But I don't know, there's the issues of what is it and is there universal income? I don't know. But this is the reality that we're in right now. And so what we all have to do in our roles and as individuals is be ready for that. And for us to do that, you know, one of the things, we've heard it in the last couple of days, people will say, yes, 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 but we've had change before. And in 1894, there was a big issue about the poo in London from the horses. And in 1898, there was a conference in New York, and the biggest issue was the poo, and that there would be 9 feet of poo on the roads in London if this kept going. And of course, it never got there because the cars came. So we've had these sorts of challenges. The only thing that we have now is it's global, it's scale, and it's fast. So we actually need to be taking on board, what are we going to do, what do we do next, and get ready for it. And a lot of people, my view, have their heads in the sand. And I talk about that about a lot of my colleagues, because in this education area, it's really interesting that you've got a regulator talking to you today. We are the handbrake of innovation. I'm talking to you about what's got to change in education. The bit that worries me the most, we get no pressure from anyone to change. We are trying to tell businesses, government, teachers, and encourage students and their parents, you've got to think about it differently. And there's this paradigm and one of my colleagues, Dom, this morning talked about fear and control, and I think it is so wrapped around this issue. We know what we know, and we're really scared to step out of thinking about it a different way. So let's go on the ride. So there was a report, or Shara Evans did I think an op-ed and talked about millions of Australians need to wake up, and quoted the Randstad recent piece of work where 84% of Australians surveyed said they weren't concerned about automation. and 77% believe that they won't need to change their careers in the next 10 years. Now, I cannot uphold the robustness of that survey. I can't comment. However, that was not a surprise to read that. So I want to move on to thinking about education and how will we respond. Well, I chair an organisation that upholds this. We put all our kids into this at the end of the year in New Zealand, and in about the July we take all their devices off them. We don't, the schools have to, because they've got to learn to read, to write again with a pen and paper. We make sure we're absolutely ruthless and we don't let them take a single piece of information in with them. Yet they and we, every moment of our life, have access to a whole lot of information. And then they do this exam and we have great integrity in the process, and we have a bit of paper at the end and we said, this person on this subject matter has done X. That's going to be really helpful for their future life journey. This has to change, and it has to change now. And why does it have to change? Well, you will probably all know this, but you know, one of the AI systems, it can sit the SAT exam in the US and do as well as an average student. That's because it's actually repetitive, it's cognitive, repetitive, the sort of thing we've heard before. It's not actually, the way we're approaching this is not helping our young people or helping the employer. So some of you in this space will have seen this, and this is out of the World Economic Forum, and it talks about 21st century skills. So one of the things I will be asked over and over again is, well, what do I get my kids to do? Well, I think this is a very useful framework to start thinking about skills for the future. And it talks about we all need some foundation literacies, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, financial literacy, and a last one, which if you were in the sessions yesterday, civics and cultural literacy, understanding about community and society. It goes on to say competencies, and these are things, creativity, communication. It goes on to talk about character attributes, character qualities, curiosity, persistence, grit. Now, I was last week at the Global Leaders Forum, and there were 3 words that I would have heard again and again and again and again come from people when they're talking about the future and what sort of leadership is needed. And they were creativity, and they were curiosity, and they were resilience or persistence and grit. And then, of course, you don't need to read this, but there's a whole lot of work done on what would be the new skills for leaders and managers. So the previous were, what are we thinking about in terms of skill sets that we should be educating on? And there are lists that will come out, World Economic Forum, on these top 10 skills in 2020, complex problem solving, creativity, emotional intelligence, coordination, cognitive flexibility. And you've heard these as you've sat through this. This is what we will need to have. But what does it mean for the subject matter stuff? And I think, and Dom was talking this morning again about, and I concur with him, we've got to fill up on stuff, and we've got to be prepared to let it go, and fill up again, and let it go, and fill up again and let it go. And so when we think of subject matter and technical skills, as well as soft skills, so I'm thinking about how we used to lead and manage and hierarchical approaches and all the rest, we've got to fill up, and then we've got to actually learn a new way and go forward on that. However, I couldn't have got up here and not said, well, what might be jobs that you need to think about now? And if we go over to that, your left-hand side, there's a whole lot that are no surprise whatsoever. The software engineer, AR, VR, computer visioning, data science, cybersecurity, etc. On this other side, there are other And so is that what we're about? No, that's not what we're about. There are a lot of other things needed along with those competencies. Things like social enterprise businesses that are already there now but may have more opportunity in a world that is enabled with software which has got global connectedness and scale. And down the bottom is, if any of you were lucky enough to sit in the presentation from Rachel Botman yesterday, I added one that I thought of last night, a trust engineer. How do we manage, think about trust, etc.? So there are jobs, these are things that are there, they're there now, but there are going to be more that evolve. And so when we think about education and we think about skills, we think about this young woman who's got this fabulous robot. What's happening now is the power is transferring to the individual in terms of learning and education. This young woman could have been at MIT in a master's degree, and this is part of advanced robotics. She could have gone on eBay and bought the parts and then gone into a chat room and actually worked with someone and learned how to do it. She could have gone to a makerspace and done it. She could have been in a hackathon. She could be a scientist. She could be an liberal arts person. So she can do all this without any of the education frameworks that we have now. And she can do this because we're connected. So where we've talked quite a lot about connectedness has lots of issues and threats, it's opened up education and learning. There has never been a better time and a more easy time to participate in ongoing education and learning. Because we're now in the world of borderless education. But in New Zealand, we're in a New Zealand world of education, and I'm sure you in Australia are in a an Australian world of education. You sort of have these little fringe bits that you will be involved with, but it's all about us and how we'll do it and how we will protect the learner. Education is so regulated. It's as regulated as the aviation industry. It's as regulated as the health industry. And yet, the information that is available and where we can participate is now so broad. And so a number of you will have heard of MOOCs, which have now been mostly renamed to nano degrees because they got a really bad rap. And they got a bad rap from a lot of people. I sat in ministers' offices who gave them a bad rap. Terrible things. People don't complete them. Don't get distracted by those who want quality degrees in New Zealand. These are platform education because through some of these providers, some of them are providers, you actually can tap into the best skill sets globally to learn stuff. And last year, Harvard Business Review, or 215, sorry, published a report on were they any good, did they make a difference? And most of the reason people actually participated in a MOOC was to advance their career in some way, change jobs, move jobs, whatever. 25 million people were enrolled, and most, there was, of those that were involved, completed, almost all got the advancement they want, but even those that didn't got out of it what they wanted. What is this completion thing? Maybe you only needed the 1 hour. That was the bit that really helped you to open up the paradigm or the area that you needed help with. At the moment, you could sign up to a data science qualification with Microsoft. If you're in Silicon Valley at the moment, you could start on probably about 200,000 US if you had the qualifications. You can do this for free, right here, right now. No pre-entry qualifications, no black box of university. I'll show you what I've got. We'll come back and say whether you can come and do this. And all you'll pay, if you really want the certificate, is $500 for the certificate. That's the world we live in education at the moment. In New Zealand, we've got Frances Valentine, some of you may have heard, and who's doing amazing, innovative things in education delivery, and they run the Tech Futures Lab, where they're running courses for individuals, for corporates, even with boards. You come along and you learn a lot of the things that we're talking about and how you need to think about that in terms of your life, but also your business models for companies. They didn't come to NZQA and get the course accredited. Oh, I wonder why. Well, it would have taken quite a while. We would have told them all the things you needed to have that accredited. They just got up and did it. And what they have done are two things. How did they get the validation it was good? They got the big corporates to come in and say, we will put our names behind them, behind this course. What else have they done? When you have been on it, you get your participation verified on blockchain. At NZQA at the moment, we've got a project going on right now where, because we love looking after New Zealand, and a company involved in the autonomous vehicle space said we'd love to come and do R&D in New Zealand. Remember, we want to be an R&D nation as well. Oh, that's a good thing. But we'd want to be able to get skills, people coming through, not necessarily young people, it could be older people retraining, whatever. We need to know there's a skills flow to support this if we became involved. They're interested, the Ministry of Transport's interested, our effective Ministry of Economic Development's interested, and the business that came in said, we would want to work with this Udacity program over there as the skills base to develop people. Oh my God, is that a challenge? That's not a New Zealand course. Can we validate it? Well, it doesn't really matter because, you know, we could say it doesn't really matter because you can go and do that right now. But actually for people coming in, they may want to be able to say we've been part of this course. They may want to know what is the level of that course. So when they have the currency of you or yourselves, if we talk about Michael, it will be able to say I did this Udacity course and actually it's equivalent to a master's degree in the old scheme. So we're looking at badging, and some of you in the sector will understand this, where we're able to say this is valid, it's this sort of equivalence, and if you go, you will be badged with it. We've gone a step further, which we're also looking at how we can use blockchain to put that badging on it. So what does this mean for education? Well, let's think about that qualification in that linear pathway that just about everyone in this room by your age, my age, we know it so well. It goes like you go preschool, and then you go school, and then you go secondary school, and then you go to university. And when you go to university, you sign up for 3 or 4 years, and you get a degree. If you looked at the people you're exposed to in the last couple of days, there's some places you'd want to do a degree way ahead of the places on offer here, because they will be the places that are leading in the thinking. So when we think of a qualification, we're going to have to relearn and relearn, and we've got to have I call it the currency of qualification, the currency of you, because I've got to be able to come and tell you about myself, and it's got to say the things I've done and who I am and what I'm able at. So we've got to rethink, what does a qualification mean? We've got to rethink it for us, we've got to rethink it for our kids, and we've got to think about what the whole global offering, the speed. Have we got the 4 years? Is the person teaching the 4 years up to date? And we've got to get past the bricks and mortar. And there's research done, or if you talk to a number of people in the bricks and mortar institutes, they'll tell you all sorts of things. They will tell you about how it's so important to socialise, it's so important to do X and Y. That's why we need to have the bricks and mortar as it is now. We've got universities in New Zealand upsizing. We have got a couple that are halving the bricks and mortar. Big gutsy decisions to halve your bricks and mortar. Huge capital tied up in that. And when you actually talk to users, the learners, some of those stories that we tell ourselves as the providers of bricks and mortar, they're not valid to the user. They're quite happy to do it at midnight, to do it in the weekends, to be a grandmother doing it, to be a 14-year-old doing it. So what the learners are prepared to do and what our institutes are offering are very different. So for me, the day of the qualification as we know it is over, and it's about verification. And it's verification of participation in learning things. And sometimes it will be an intensive multi-year program that could sound a bit like a degree. Sometimes it may be a 6-month participation in something that you did just yourself, self-directed, self-learned. Sometimes it might be because I came and shadowed Craig and I worked with, it is Craig? Yep. I worked alongside Craig, and in the end, he said I did, and these were my attributes. And we could verify that. How do we assure it? Well, we know how to do it, I assure you, as NZQA. We have independent review people, we do it. And in fairness to all the people in our organisation, we do it with such integrity, and people are committed to this change. But we say, where is that openness, that transparency? And again, I go back to Rachel yesterday talking about the leap of trust. The education quality is very opaque. Why don't I say it was great? And then the employer says, great result. The person providing says, great. So how are we going to assure quality going forward? Versus further regulate the regulation to be really sure we've got it right. And I've talked a couple of times about blockchain, and some of you will have been in the session yesterday, where this is a qualification, be it a qualification as we know it, or participation, is actually an asset. And it can be digitised, and it can be locked in a ledger. So NZQA, we hold the ledger for New Zealand. We don't need to do that going forward, because actually I think there are going to be other technologies of which they will be far more valid and far more meaningful and helpful if we can lock up what your learning and ongoing learning is in this sort of technology. So what is relevant when we think of education? Is it subject? Our secondary schools spend the whole time, and for a lot of the magnificent teachers in it, it really frustrates them, teaching to the test. When we're digitising the exams, and so in the first instance that's paper to digital, but that's not the game in town. Once you start going paper to digital, you've got to ask, hold on, what are we assessing? Why are we assessing it? If we looked at collaboration, why are we doing all of this on our own and we make an assessment on that individual? And are we teaching the subject to the test when we know the subject, we want you to be able to learn and relearn, and we want you to have literacies that will enable you to participate in the learning of new things. So what's relevant? Is it subjects? Is it competencies and character? New Zealand curriculum's got a great front end where we could do quite a lot of teaching to and assessing character and competencies. We don't. We do it all on the subject end. When we've looked at doing that digitising, who are the biggest handbrakes? The parents, the you and me, who say, oh, no, we know it's really important. One, you've got to be able to learn, you've got to do well, you've got to get this. And we have a standards-based approach, which is now well respected, but it was, and we've got to know that you got 78 and you got 76, so you're better than this person. Parents absolutely want the best for their kids, but they actually know what they know in the past. So when you look at starting to even digitise, we have got parents saying, this is a bad thing. Kids, they can do some of this as a leisure thing, but we need to not have them on screens. What are those parents doing for the rest of their day? They are working and participating globally on, a lot of them, on things that are to do with being in front of a screen. So, and is it about completion of qualifications as we know it, or is it participation in learning institutes and in vocational experience, etc.? Is it actually a qualification? This great paper, you don't have to think you're missing out not reading it. That's your record of learning you get out of New Zealand. That's going to be your passport to the future. So when we look at education, I think we've got to look at moving from a regulated approach to enable permissionless innovation. So from compulsory attendance to global participation. I don't know all the answers, but we've got to start moving this. And is it a linear participation? Pre-entry criteria, you can't do that Microsoft degree. You could do it if you're 14, if you're 75. You can do it over 4 years. You can do it over 1 year. You can do what you like. Whereas we have got a whole lot in this regulated pre-entry criteria. Fees, but actually you can participate in a lot of cases for free, and that's been part of that digitisation, demonetisation. Institutional rules, you have to do it this way, you have to do it in this time frame, you have to do whatever. Two, it's virtual, you do it without those rules. Centralised assurance, like the organisation that I currently chair, to actually thinking about what are the tools we could use for assurance going forward. And moving from institutional approach to an open source approach. Sometimes in an institution, sometimes not, but multi-dimensional. So what do we each have to do? Well, first bit is change our mindset. We could have had some beams at this conference, and when I was at Westfield the other week in San Fran, we actually had beams come down the hall and into the room and be with us in the meeting and go out. So it's like a video screen, but it's actually mobile. So you take yourself around the whole building and interact with people. You've got to get in the mindset of this is okay, and actually we need to do it a different way, and this is so important. And we've got to have new conversations and new commitments. We've got to move, I think, to learnability. That is the key thing going forward. And we talked about it, we had a session earlier this morning about it's fine, we're all middle, upper class, whatever we want to say, we're all lucky, we're all in jobs, we're all in suits. What about the people in the trucks that are going to lose their job? And some of that is, we've got major issues we're going to talk about. Where is the government intervention during transition, etc. But learnability, out of that, learn something else. Out of that, learn something else. And that has got to be and learn something that you don't even know what you're going to learn next time. We've got to think about skills. And we've got to think about not those the subject type approach that we've talked about, but what are the skills in terms of our ability to think, but think in multi-dimensions and cross areas and bring that together. We've got to think in terms of empathy. We've got to think about skills in design and creativity. And we've got to be agile. So when we think about education and skills, be it from an organisation, be it as a country, be it as an individual, it's got to be agile, it's got to change. We've got to go for it, and then we've got to go for it again. And we've got to be open. Oops. And this was an example I just picked up of AT&T, and where the CEO, and it was last year, said that for their people, he believed they need to have 5 to 10 hours of learning every week. Something new. Formal, not formal. Udacity's partnering up with AT&T and offering some courses. They've put it into thinking about how they communicate to their people, all their people, about what are the pathways and what are the future things that we would value, and therefore, and these are ways you can go about getting it. Not all the 5 to 10 hours are done in work time, but it's a commitment. When you have your performance review, it's about your willingness to learn and participate, and what have you done. This is from the Manpower report, and that upskilling and adapting to the fast-changing world of work will be the defining challenge of our time. And it's in our hands now, all of us, to disrupt ourselves. And Michael, the selves is in recognition to your great presentation the other day, because his point was we're multiple selves. But my other point is, for a regulator, we've got to do those things I described for NZQA to disrupt ourselves. We won't be in business. We shouldn't be if this rolls out. Boards of directors have to think about what is governance. What is a business case anymore in the future? You know, give us the discounted cash flow over so many years on. That's how we were brought up and how we thought. What is the way? What are the new skills? What does agile process really mean in an organisation? And have we embraced it and enabled it? We've got to disrupt our executive teams. We've got to disrupt our parent thinking. We have to disrupt ourselves and think about the new opportunities and embrace it with excitement. How great is that? I'm not just in this field, this area forever, as I live that long, long life that Bernard gave to us in his last presentation. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. You do need a drink. It is exciting, and as somebody who has 2 small children who's recently started school, it's equally frightening to think about the type of system and the type of community, 2 of our strongest communities in education and work, and how behind we are in some of this thinking. I've got questions, but in the interest of time, I might just throw to the audience, given we've got quite limited time before we need to wrap up. So, just one here, if you wouldn't mind standing, sir, there'll be a microphone come to you, and just state your name and where you're from.
Hi, Derek from Ivo. My question is, my 4-year-old told me the other day that he wants to be a policeman when he grows up, and seeing what's happening in Dubai and things like that, that's a bit scary that that might not be a job anymore. So my question is, do you think the government is doing enough for our school education to prepare our kids for the future workplace, or as parents, do we have to do more to get our kids prepared for that?
As I said in my presentation, the regulator is the handbrake. The government is not going to be the ones often, and I look at New Zealand and Australia, that are going to be out there with this unbelievable leadership position. But governments respond to tipping points, to people asking for, and that's where I started my talk and said what really worries me, people aren't putting any pressure on us as NZQA. We should feel the Bunsen burner on our bottoms every day. We're not doing it. So don't look to the government. Look as communities and as individuals to be a tipping point on getting us to make the changes. And I think the other bit is it's not a big bang theory. Well, we'll do all of this and then we'll get it where it's perfect and it'll be a new system. It pilots, trials, doing things differently, putting some equivalents in, but even starting to be not scared by that are things that we should do.
Hi, Max from AMP. Do you think there are some professions that are almost off limits to this sort of disruption? And I can just think of like the health professionals, doctors, nurses. Are they off limits to this type of disruption?
Well, no, they're not, is my short answer. I don't think anything is really off limits. And if you looked at some of the other presentations, but even without the presentations, I'd rather have probably a pathology slide read by IBM Watson than a pathologist right now, because it's likely to pick up more than the pathologist. And so there's going to be the times of what does that mean, and therefore what do we do and how do we make decisions. one of the things it's threatening in the professions is we've been used to the supply chain of the profession being you will graduate, then you'll go and work and do this for a while, and you will be the lawyers, accountants, doctors, you'll be the registrars in the hospital. You will have a great training ground, and quite a lot of those training grounds are going to be replaced. They're being replaced now. So how do we think about getting people at the critical thinking end of some of these professions, which means us thinking about the business model of professions? But I think, I mean, that Dubai policeman, because I was coming to talk to you, and so I always keep an eye on futurism and World Economic Forum and these things. They just come on my wonderful machine every day. And I read this one about the police, I think, you're having me on. You know, this is not for real. So maybe I have been suckered in and I've suckered you all in, but I cross-reference a number of ways and I see where it's reported and it's like, oh my God. And then go back to one of the other presentations on security and thinking about facial recognition technology and all sorts of things. Whew, that's getting to be really quite scary and interesting. You know.
I'm so sorry, we need to wrap up. We could talk to you forever, Sue. Thank you for your passion and insights today. I think there's some amazing messages there around big and fast. We've heard it, but it's very real. And how about we learn and need to relearn and learn and relearn and let go and fill up and let go and fill up. And my number one takeaway personally will today be about the handbrake that I am. Thank you for your time.